Please listen carefully.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about actually an event we did last year here at CityWorks, a field trip we ran, and some things that we learned through that experience about Roanoke at a human scale. As a little bit of background, the Ride Solutions program is a transportation program that encourages people to get out of their cars, leave their cars at home, to work to get cars off the road in the region for a lot of reasons. And we go about that a lot of ways, but we're always most interested in doing things that engage in community building and engage arts and culture when we go about this programming. So we'll do things like put musicians on buses. We will ride bikes at night and tell ghost stories about famous local landmarks and get a couple guys together and start a bike share system. A couple years ago, or last year rather, CityWorks came to us and said, we would like you to run a transportation field trip. Which I said, absolutely, we will do that. And then I thought, well, how do you do that in a way that isn't mind-numbingly boring, right? You could go out and say, there's a crosswalk and there's a bus shelter, and what we wanted to focus on for this field trip was this idea that transportation is not about the journey, it's about the destination. Transportation isn't something that you do for its own sake, it's something you do to connect with your community, to engage in civic life or economic opportunities or just to get outside. And all that stuff on the ground in the middle can help you or hinder you, but without some place to go, this is kind of an academic discussion. So in order to explore this idea, what we did was we started by making up some people. We created a series of characters who all found themselves by choice or circumstance without a car in Roanoke one day. And then we thought, well, how do we take these people and move them around the Roanoke Valley? Said, well, we'll create a bus system to do that. And we'll run it from right here in the Grandin Village and connect a couple of places in the valley. You will notice that that map is extraordinarily ugly and unhelpful. And that's because a major barrier to public transportation is actually that most transit maps are extraordinarily ugly and unhelpful. And that when people look at them, they're terrified that they're going to miss their bus or end up on the wrong part of town. So we wanted to make sure the participants in our program had that same terror. We then assigned each of our characters a bunch of stuff that they needed to do that was kind of in this role-playing way appropriate to that character. They needed to go to church or buy diapers or check a book out from the library. Over the course of this day, we assigned characters to a team. We gave that team a guide whose main job was to make sure that the team didn't get lost, but otherwise were instructed to be as unhelpful as possible. And then we set those folks loose in Roanoke. We said, here you are, you don't have a car. How do you access the things that you need to do, the places that you need to go, with the information you have at hand and the options, transportation options you have at hand? We learned a lot. One of the things that we learned from this is that 4 guys pushing an empty stroller around Roanoke get a lot of funny looks. But we also learned that if you're pushing a stroller around Roanoke because you've got a kid, your experience of pedestrian accommodations are very different than someone who's just walking around. And similarly, maybe if you're on crutches or a wheelchair, your experience of the exact same facility is quite different. So, we did this in order to give these folks, a lot of whom are urban planners or planning students, this real on-the-ground experience of some of these kind of broad concepts they might be playing with about density and infrastructure and so forth. And we think we did a good job, but what I wanted to finish up my last few minutes here was actually what we learned as organizers when we ran these folks through these things. And since CityWorks, we've run this a couple other times with other groups of participants. And I'm going to start one of the things we learned by picking on, if I can get this to, or I'm not going to pick on. Well, we picked on a group of Virginia Tech graduate students. And so one of the things that we did, oh, here they are. So one of the things that we did with these characters is that several of the characters didn't have smartphones. And we said, some people just don't. They don't have the money or the interest or the technological savvy. And so you have to figure out your day without a smartphone. So some of these teams had to use this ancient technology called talking to people to figure out how to do what they needed to do. And what was particularly true with the graduate students is the amount of social anxiety this created was enormous. This exercise was time limited, so they had to get to a bus stop by a certain time, and a lot of that time ended up being eaten by making the decision of who to talk to or trying to find anything other than having to talk to a person to find out, where's the bank in this neighborhood, or where can I buy apples? Similarly, even the teams that had phones, only once did someone actually use it to call someone. They used Google Maps, they would talk to Siri, but they wouldn't talk to a human being to figure out what are the resources in this community, how do I complete the stuff on my list. Now, sometimes that wasn't always bad, because even when we did talk to people, we had experiences where people didn't understand what was in their own community. A lot of times folks knew where they lived, the space they drove through, and their destination. They knew the best parking space, but not a business 3 storefronts down. We even talked to a lady who, when we asked her how to find something that I knew was literally 3 storefronts down at a shopping center, she had no idea. She said, I work here, that's all I pay attention to. And similarly to that, we had folks who did know that things existed, but their sense of scale was pretty distorted. So we had one team who was trying to find a gym, and they were told, yes, there's a gym, go a couple blocks that way, you can walk there. So my team started walking in that direction, and I grabbed them, I said, hey, actually, that gym is about 5 miles away. You're gonna have to cross a highway, and even if you'd had time to walk there, you're gonna be walking through some really hostile, pedestrian, unfriendly territory to get there. So this person was trying to be really helpful, but their sense of how their community fit together was based upon their experience of driving at 55 miles an hour in their automobile. They had no sense of a pedestrian or human scale of their community. So this, to be clear, this is all very anecdotal. We didn't do scientific research or interviews with these folks, but the reality is if these were really people trying to get through their day, they would have missed their bus, or they would have missed their doctor's appointment. They would have ended up lost in their community. They might not have asked for help at all, or they might have made other choices because of these various interactions that had nothing to do with infrastructure, or nothing to do with did the bus go where I needed it to go, or was there a bike lane. So kind of in summary, we started running a transportation field trip for CityWorks. And we have discovered since that a lot of transportation is communication, both in the sense of your willingness to talk to people and people to talk to you, and how you get information, how you communicate through, whether that's devices or other sorts of means. We also discovered that this is a little bit about isolation, that a lot of people that we worked with just didn't understand how their communities work together, how they fit, and the resources, because their lives were their home, their car, and their destination. And so despite the fact that we started this experiment kind of with this idea that transportation isn't about the journey, it's about the destination, turns out it is about the journey, that there's a lot of social implications, cultural implications of how people physically move through their community and interact with resources and pieces of their community. So I appreciate CityWorks Expo letting us run this experiment and make their attendees really uncomfortable for our own amusement, and help us kind of learn these other functions of transportation in the Roanoke Valley. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Expo.